this one first.
Banking Committee. Senator Warren, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
You have been critical of Mr. Powell, and you, I think, are going to be critical of this move today.
So we're talking about interest rates, and the Fed added interest rates again today, up 25 basis points, or what is also known as a quarter of a point. And Elizabeth Warren here is going to explain to you why she loves inflation. Remember, when inflation is effectively a government-imposed tax, it allows the government to spend more and more money, to print money, literally. And she loves that because that gives her more power. And she's going to explain now why the Fed should stop raising rates to combat inflation, because she loves inflation, because it gives her more power, allows her to spend more of your money that we don't have to begin with. Listen.
I just think it's the wrong direction. Look, all of the signs are going in the right way. That is, inflation is abating, the economy's softening. We've seen GDP begin to pull back a little. And we've acknowledged all along that the problems we have that have been driving prices higher are not all problems that you can fix by raising interest rates.
Well, you'll notice in this video that she'll never point to government spending as a contributory factor towards inflation. No, she's going to point to price fixing, price gouging. And later in this video, she's actually going to say that price gouging is 40% of the inflation problem.
You know, we have a war in Ukraine that messes up supply chain.
Wait a second. I forgot about that. Part of the inflation problem is the war in Ukraine, which she supports. She supports the war in the Ukraine. So, right, she's just like, oh, it's part of the war in Ukraine. Everybody supports that. Not everybody, right? And I don't know if you followed this, but there's some type of like attack on the Kremlin that happened within the last 24 hours. It's possible that the Ukrainians did this, or it's possible that like Putin did it to make him look good within his own country. It's really hard to say at this point. But to say that the war in Ukraine is part of the inflation problem because we're sending boatloads of money over there and it's crimping our supply chain, that is true. But remember, she supports that.
Costs and food costs. We've had a lot of price gouging that giant corporations don't want to talk about, but families are sure feeling it. And you can raise interest rates, but it's not going to affect those. You've got other tools you have to work. We've had supply chain kinks that are beginning to unkink. Again, not affected by interest rates. And what concerns me is that Chair Powell hasn't just raised interest rates. He has raised them on a curve.
A curve? He's raised them a curve because we had artificially low interest rates, flatline basically. Oh, I'm not going to say zero, but effectively zero for a artificially long time. And who supported those types of interest rates? Very, very low. Elizabeth Warren. And so when you have them for an exceedingly low interest rates for an exceedingly long time, eventually, right, things have to go back to an equilibrium. That is her fault in part that they've been low for so long.
We've seen
in 40 years.
Deepest in 40 years. In 14 months, he's gone up 5 points here. And that's when things start to break.
She hates Powell, by the way. She loathes Powell.
Plus, look where he's aiming. He's aiming to put people out of work.
Now, that's just, how do I want to say this? That's just kind of hyperbolic, I guess. That's just downright cruel. He's aiming to people out of work. You know, the job of the Fed is to slow down the economy, in this case, to kill inflation. There's always that choice between having inflation and slowing down the economy. When we slow down the economy, yes, the idea from the Fed is to actually induce a recession. And now this is one of the most predicted recessions we've ever had. We may or may not actually be in it. My feeling is that we're actually not going to have a typical recession. We're going to have what is worse, which is actually a stagflationary period where we have a slowdown in the economy, but inflation stays elevated. Remember, the Fed's goal for inflation is 2%. That's their stated goal. I don't think that anyone really believes that they really feel they can get that back down to that number. But right now, inflation is elevated above 5 officially, and probably even more than that unofficially.
Take your point that inflation has come down,
Yeah.
but it is still elevated by recent historical standards.
Absolutely.
And that exacts a very severe price, particularly on low-income individuals or
Absolutely.
people on fixed income. They hurt because
They do hurt. But of course, she wants more inflation. She is one of the architects of inflation.
of that. So if you're committed to the idea of bringing inflation down, how can the
Which she is not.
Fed help do that if not merely by raising interest rates?
Well,
what are the other tools they have? And let's put Congress off to the side, because there's a fiscal side here too.
right. But with respect, I think it's the wrong frame. When you start it by saying, what else can the Fed do? The Fed is a one-trick pony. The Fed raises interest rates and lowers interest rates,
Right.
basically. So they look at the world through that lens. But look at the effect of price gouging, for example. And the
Here it comes. Listen to this.
data, depending on who you want to read and what you want to look at, but at least 40% of the increase in prices attributed to price gouging. That is,
All right, that is just ridiculous. At least 40% of inflation is due to price gouging. Are you out of your mind? She's crazy. The woman's out of her mind.
look at
No one
industries where there's
feigns
greater
concern
concentration.
like
And what
Elizabeth
you see
Warren.
is prices
Warren.
went up more sharply. And you see that margins went up, that profit margins were going up.
Spoken like a true inflation lover. She loves inflation because it makes her more powerful.
They've done more than even they should have
Right.
done. And to squeeze out what inflation remains, you would look at what legislation to address price gouging?
Legislation could be part of it, but the FTC is part.
Legislation. Let's give Congress more power.
Give us some tools on price gouging. I'd like to see us do more. That would be the legislation part. States also have
There's
anti-price
already
gouging.
a bunch of laws in place about price gouging. Lots of laws. This is just the same thing as like saying, well, we need more gun laws. How about the current gun laws? Aren't those like, what's wrong with
These
those?
industries with specificity about who's in there pushing prices up more than is justified by an increase in cost.
Those evil, evil, evil corporations out there price gouging everybody. Man. So that's Elizabeth Warren. She loves inflation. That's just the only way to say it, because it allows her to spend money. It's a tax on you. It's a tax on you that hits the people that supposedly she thinks she is protecting. Right? Inflation, for the most part, disproportionately hurts low-income people who theoretically Warren is out there protecting. But no, she's not actually doing that.